today I'm going to try and jump into a little bit about, so the inside, when we're talking about causal modeling, and one of the things we want to do with causal modeling is apply it to machine learning, particularly reinforcement learning. There's this area of reinforcement learning called, there's this reinforcement learning is all based on this idea of Markov decision processes, and there is a lot that decision theory has to say about decision processes because after all, they're just sequential decisions. And so, one second, am I even on my stream again? I'm just a bit out of it today. Let's see here. Oh, no, I'm good. Yeah, so, right, so this decision theory has much to say about Markov decision processes because Markov decision processes are sequences of decisions. And so one element of, one way we can ask about how causal reasoning can be brought to bear on reinforcement learning is to look at causal decision theory. And so in causal decision theory, there's this interesting kind of core problem. Whoa, what just happened? All kinds of craziness going on here. Alright. Did I click on something? Why is it so loud? Let us... What's the sound there? Turn down the music. Right, so within causal decision theory, there's this idea of, within decision theory, there is causal decision theory, and one of the main kind of motivating ideas behind, or one of the toy problems that they usually use to motivate causal decision theory is this idea of Newcombs paradox or Newcombs problem. And so I want to hopefully do a little bit of, I want to go over Newcombs problem today and see, I'm familiar with the problem. I want to be able to explain it better. So let's jump right in. So there's a lot that you can just find online. So this, again, the idea is Newcombs problem. Newcombs problem, or Newcombs paradox, is this, well, let's just look it up. It's this idea, it's this toy problem, a paradox that motivates the difference between causal decision theory and evidential decision theory. And so the idea is, hopefully, that if we can get a good grasp of this paradox and maybe some modern applications of it. I know a friend of mine was telling me that, you know, they were developing some bandit algorithm when they were basing it on some similar ideas here, but it was much more practical. But let's just bring up the paradox, see if we can parse it a little bit. So what I want to do is just kind of get a grasp of this guy, his idea here. Great. So in philosophy and mathematics, Newcombs paradox, also referred to as Newcombs problem, is a thought experiment involving a game between two players. One is able to predict the future. Let's look at it. There's a reliable predictor, a player, and two boxes designated A and B. Okay, so we got a predictor, a player, two boxes. The player is given a choice between taking only box B or taking both boxes A and B. The player knows the following. Box A is clear. It always contains a visible $1,000. Box B is opaque, and its content has already been set by the predictor. If the predictor has predicted the player will take both boxes A and B, and then box B contains nothing. If the predictor has predicted that the player will take only box B, then box B contains $1 million. let's just think about that. So we have two boxes. Well, let's just okay. We have two boxes, two players. One is a psychic. Psychic can predict the future. Psychic says that if the options available to the players to take one box, well, I guess take box B or take both boxes A and B, if the predictor predicts that the person is going to take box B, then there's $1 million in B. The predictor will have put $1 million in B. If the predictor predicts the player will take if the predictor predicts that they'll take both boxes, then B contains nothing. So box A always contains 1,000. Great. So let's start here. So let's say that the person chooses box A and B. The predictor would have predicted that. So we're assuming that the player does not know what the predictor predicted or what box B contains. So they don't know what the prediction is. And so like player A, let's look at the options. Player, the regular player takes boxes A and B. So in this table, we're having cases where the predicted choice and the actual choice conflict, but fine. So in that case, predicted choice is A and B, and so the playout gets $1,000 from box A, but nothing from B. Similar, if the actual choice is B, they get 0. If the actual choice is A and B, and the predicted choice is B, then we get this. We get so we get the $1 million in box B because the predictor would have predicted B and therefore put $1 million in B, or they get $1,000, and they get the $1,000 in A. If they just pick B, then they get $1 million. All right, so kind of reading through. So the reason this is important is because two different strategies for this game, one using evidential decision theory and one using causal decision theory, actually return different results. 1 second. By the way, if you're watching, go ahead and give me a shout out in the comment section just to make sure that your comments are coming through. But right, so one is so in evidential decision theory, we would just kind of take the expected utility and then choose the argument that matches the expected utility. And then causal decision theory, as we'll see, will give another one. So let's just see how Wikipedia explains it. You know what? Before we do that, let's keep going. So considering the expected utility when the probability of the predictor being right is almost certain or certain, the player should. So we're going to assume that the predictor. So I kind of want to just write that out. Bring my little screen up in this thing here. That's not good. One second. I'm trying to share my screen so I can do a little bit of audio sharing here. bad at figuring out how to get. Alright. Anyway, let me just try this. I was hoping to get my notebook to show up in here. Looks like it's not going to happen. Anyway. So where was I? Technical difficulties aside. What I want is we're going to assume that the player gets a very low, that has a perfect probability of being right. So then this would be, I guess this would happen. So if we assume that them picking box A and B, or box B has a kind of 50-50, then we have 50% probability here, 50% probability here, and so the expected utility would be half of this, which is 500,000, plus half of this, which is 500. And so wait, no, that's wrong. I want to pick the choice. So what I want to do is say, okay, this seems obvious. So right, like if I choose B, I'm the player, and I choose B, and I assume that the predictor can predict perfectly, then I get 1 million, and if I choose A and B, I get 1,000. Right. The choice statistically maximizes the player's winning, setting them at about $1 million per game. So considering the expected utility when probability predictor is being right or almost certain, the player should choose box B. The choice statistically maximizes the player's winning, setting them about $1 million per game. So I choose B. Yeah, so seems like if I choose B, it's always better for me to. This is the better option, right? And then if the dominance principle, whatever that is, the player should choose strategy that's always better. Choosing boxes A and B will always yield $1,000 more than only choosing B. Right, so let's see if I choose. So if I choose A and B, so let's forgetting about the predictor's choice, and I just say choose A and B. Let's just say all of these outcomes are equally probable, then I have a 50% chance of getting. Okay, well I get maybe 0.25 times this plus 0.25 times this. For A and B. So that's $250 plus $2,500 and $250. And then here I get an expected value of $5,000. So it seems to me to be consideration of whether or not you believe the predictor is going to be right. But this is just not very intuitive. Let's go watch a video.
In front of you there are two boxes. Box 1 is transparent and contains £1,000. Box 2 is opaque and contains either £1 million or nothing. You are given the following choice. Either you can take what is in both boxes, or you can take only what is in the second box. However, before you are presented with this choice, a supercomputer which has the power to predict your choices with an unerring accuracy adds the following catch. If the computer predicts that you will open both boxes, then it will put nothing in box 2. If it predicts that you will choose to open only the second box, then it puts £1 million in the box. The supercomputer has carried out this test hundreds of times and has never made a wrong prediction. So the sequence of events are as follows. The supercomputer makes its prediction, and based on this prediction it either puts the £1 million into box 2 or leaves it empty. You then make your choice. What do you choose? Created by William Newcomb and first published by Robert Nozick in 1969, the problem has been dividing people for the last 50 years. You might be thinking that the answer is obvious, and that there's no actual problem here. However, in a recent poll of over 31,000 people, 53.5% chose to open box 2, and 46.5% chose to open both boxes. So why are people so divided on this question? Let's find out.
Oh, I see. So, right, if you know, so there's a bit of circular logic here. So, like, if you know, for example, that there's the machine, you say that you're going to pick box 2, and so the machine is going to put $1 million in box 2. But then once that's happened, you realize that if you also go into box A, then you'll get $1 million plus $1,000. But then the machine would have predicted that and then put nothing in box 2, and so you only get 1,000. So, okay, got it. That's the paradox.
At the heart of Newcomb's paradox is a conflict between two principles of decision theory, the expected utility principle and the dominance principle. But before we look at these, let's look at the standard arguments for being a one-boxer or a two-boxer. If I decide to take what is in both boxes, then the supercomputer will have almost certainly predicted this and will have left the second box empty, leaving me with only £1,000. But if I decide to just take what's in the second box, then the supercomputer will have predicted this and put the £1 million inside, leaving me much richer. I should therefore choose to take only what is in the second box. But, a two-boxer will say, when you make your decision, standing in front of the boxes, the supercomputer has already made its prediction and has therefore already placed the $1 million inside box 2 or has left it empty. Therefore, taking both boxes can only maximise your reward, as you would either get $1 million plus 1,000 or 0 plus 1,000. Whatever the supercomputer has predicted, you will end up with £1,000 more by choosing both boxes. The options and outcomes of the problem can be shown in a payoff matrix. Here we can clearly see that taking both boxes will leave you with more money, whichever prediction the supercomputer has made. In decision theory, this follows the dominance principle, which states that if one strategy is always better, no matter the circumstances, then it is rational to choose that strategy. However, this rational to choose that
Alright, so
states that if
dominance just means that you're always picking the best strategy. And it's always best because so it's always dominant because, let's see, like in this, So when I take only box 2, I get 1,000 or 100, and I take both boxes, I get 1,000, and 1,000,001, and 1,000. So in this case, whatever I do here, it's always 1,000 more than what I do there. I see, but if I assume that the prediction is perfect, then I only take box 2, then I'm always in this region. So we got to figure out how probability theory factors in here.
Ever prediction the supercomputer has made. In decision theory, this follows the dominance principle, which states that if one strategy is always better, no matter the circumstances, then it is rational to choose that strategy. However, this contradicts the expected utility principle, which states that the rational choice is the one which has the maximal expected utility, or value, to you. We can work out the expected utility of each action by multiplying each of its mutually exclusive outcomes by the probability of the outcome, given the action. Let's say, being conservative, that the supercomputer can predict the future with a 90% accuracy. We can then work out the expected utility of both actions, like so. We can see, therefore, that using the expected utility principle, the rational choice is to choose to open only
what happened?
The second box.
Alright, so we get 0.9. Where do we get the 0.9s from? Oh shoot. Not paying attention.
The supercomputer can predict the future with a 90% accuracy. We can then work out the expected utility of both actions, like so. We can see, therefore, that using the expected utility principle, the rational choice is to choose to open only the second box. So we have two rational, but we can then work out the expected utility of both actions, exclusive outcomes by the probability of the outcome, given the action. Let's say, being conservative, that the supercomputer can predict the future with a 90% accuracy. We can then work out the expected utility of both actions, like so.
So probability that I take both boxes, and I take the one box. No, wait, what? Oh, okay, so the prediction here is that we get a 0.1% probability that I'll take box 2, and a 0.9% probability that I'll take both boxes. And so it's 0.1 times, so if I take both boxes, then I get this much. That's my expected utility. And if I take, so again, probability, it feels like something's missing here. Like what? So the probability is that I'm using to multiply this out is a probability from the prediction. Okay. So I take both boxes. And it's a 0.1% chance that it put the probability in, that it predicted I'll take box 2, in which case I'll get 1,000,001, and a 9% chance that it predicted that I will choose both boxes with a 1,000% probability. So great, and then so I get 1,001. So choosing box 2 makes sense. Let's see what happens.
You can see, therefore, that using the expected utility principle, the rational choice is to choose to open only the second box. So we have two rational but contradictory answers. Still not sure if you're a one boxer or a two boxer? Well, consider the following. Suppose your friend is taking the experiment and chooses to open just the second box. But before the box is opened, you are asked to place a bet on whether there will be £1,000,000 inside. Given the success of the supercomputer in correctly predicting the outcome in hundreds of previous tests, you would surely bet that inside the box was £1,000,000. Likewise, if your friend chose to open both boxes, wouldn't you bet that box 2 is empty? Now suppose that the back of box 2 is transparent, and from where you stand you can see what's inside both boxes. Your friend taking the experiment can still only see inside box 1 and the £1,000.
Here you're like, bro,
Assuming
take
you
both
want the
boxes.
best for your friend, you would want him to open both boxes, regardless of what's in box 2. If the £1 million is in the box, it's not suddenly going to disappear if he chooses to open both. It seems that the logical thing to do would be to open both boxes, but is that how you would actually act if given the opportunity? Click on the poll in the top right hand corner to make your choice, and let me know how you voted and why down in the comments.
Alright, let's see what Julia Galliff has to say about it.
Hey everyone. The latest episode of my podcast, Rationally Speaking, is about what might be my favorite paradox ever. It's called Newcombs Problem, and here's how it goes. So imagine that you're at some eccentric carnival, and one of the tents is operated by a brilliant mad scientist. So you go in this tent and walk up to a table behind which is standing the scientist, and she points at the table, and you see that there are two boxes sitting on the table. One of them is clear, and inside the box is $1,000. The other box is opaque, and the scientist tells you the opaque box contains either $1 million or it's entirely empty. Now, your choice, she tells you, is you can either take only the opaque box or you can take both boxes. The choice is up to you. However, she says, there's a catch. As you were walking through my tent, you walked past my highly technologically advanced brain scanning machine, which scanned your brain, produced a detailed picture of your psychology, and was able to predict with near certainty whether you would, in this situation, take both boxes or only the opaque box. And if my technology predicted that you would take only the opaque box, then I put $1 million in it. If, on the other hand, my technology predicted you would take both boxes, then I put nothing in the opaque box. Also, she adds, I've done this many, many times before, and I've always been right. So everyone in your position who takes both boxes ends up with only the $1,000 in the clear box. And everyone in your position who takes only the opaque box discovers that it contains $1 million. So, which do you choose? Well, there's a couple ways of approaching Newcombs Problem. One is to say, well, you know, I sure hope that opaque box has $1 million in it, but whether it does or not, that's fixed now. The box is already on the table. There's nothing I can do to change that, so I might as well take both boxes. Either way, regardless of which state of the world I'm in, the one in which the box has $1 million or the one in which it's empty, either way, I might as well take that $1,000 in the clear box, because otherwise it's just money on the table. The other way of looking at it is to say, well, you know, everyone in my position who takes both boxes ends up with only $1,000. Everyone in my position who takes just the opaque box ends up with $1 million. Which group do I want to be in? And these two ways of approaching Newcombs Problem point at two different kinds of decision theory, two different ways of defining what is a rational way to behave. So the former way of thinking is in line with what's called causal decision theory. And causal decision theory says the rational way to behave is to condition on the state of the world, condition on the things that you can't control in your choice, and then ask, what action can I take, given the state of the world, that will cause the best expected outcome for me? So, causal decision theory says, take both boxes.
Take the action which, given the state of the world, things you can't control, causes the best expected outcome. So that's the dominance principle. And causal decision theory seems to say, okay, just do that.
On the other hand, evidential decision theory is a different form of decision theory that says the rational thing to do is to behave in such a way that your action is the strongest possible evidence that you will end up in a good, in the best outcome. In other words, which action would, if you found out that you had taken that action, make you feel happy and relieved instead of disappointed? Usually, causal and evidential decision theory point to the same action, right? Usually in the world, the action that causes the best expected outcome, conditioning on the state of the world, is the outcome that you would be relieved to hear that you had taken. Newcombs problem and related problems, which are called Newcomb-like problems, are a sort of special case in which causal and evidential decision theory give you different prescriptions. I should note that one common objection to Newcomb's problem is to say, well, this problem is invalid because there's no such thing as a perfect predictor. Yeah, you can stipulate in the thought experiment she never gets it wrong, but in real life there's no way to reliably predict with certainty what someone will do before they decide. I don't think this objection holds water. What's interesting about Newcomb's problem is that you...
Let me say that again. Wait here.
To reliably predict...
1 second. I'll be right back. All right, let me see if I can take some notes here.
With certainty what someone will do before they decide. I don't think this objection holds water. What's interesting about Newcomb's problem is that you don't actually need the predictor to be 100% accurate. She can be pretty accurate, maybe 75 or 80% accurate, and still the paradox holds. And I don't think it's that unrealistic to imagine either brain scanning technology and or highly advanced psychological prediction algorithms using people's body language or past history that could give you 75 or 80% hit rate in predicting what someone would do in a situation like this. So the unrealism objection doesn't really work, I think. Another kind of response to Newcomb's problem is to say, well, the rational thing to do is to take both boxes. But it just happens that in this case, the problem has been set up so that I get punished for doing the rational thing. And similarly, you could imagine a mad scientist who says, hey, I'll give you $1 million if you can make yourself believe that the sky is red. As a rational person, I can't make myself believe that, so I'm out $1 million, and that's too bad, but that's what happens when you design problems such that rationality is punished. And I have some sympathy for this way of thinking, but at the same time, ideally, we would want a normative rationality, a sort of ideal prescription for behaving to produce the best outcomes. We would want that to not leave you systematically, predictably worse off in a bunch of situations. So Kenny Iswaran, who's the philosopher and decision theorist who was featured on the show, what he says is that, well, Newcomb's problem reveals, and Newcomb-like problems reveal that when we're trying to define what we mean by rational behavior, we really need to break it down into different levels and talk separately about rational character or a rational disposition and a rational act in a particular circumstance. So in Newcomb's problem, rational character would be that which would lead you to always take only the one box, because that's the character that leads to being, best off. But once you're already in the room with the two boxes in front of you, the rational act is to take both boxes. And, we might hope in trying to define a coherent notion of rationality that the rational character and the rational acts would always line up, but in fact he says they don't. And this might just be what he calls the deep tragedy at the heart of rationality. There's a bunch of other Newcomb-like problems, many of which we talk about in the podcast, and I encourage you to check it out at rationallyspeakingpodcast.org. It's episode 140. But I'll leave you with one more Newcomb-like problem that I think has some interesting overlap with Newcomb's problem. It's called Parfit's Hitchhiker, because it was proposed by the philosopher Derek Parfit. So imagine that you're stranded in the desert without your wallet or phone or anything to eat or drink, and you're going to die if someone doesn't rescue you soon. But fortunately, a car happens to drive by, and the driver pulls up and rolls down his window, and it's an illustrious psychologist who is a renowned expert at reading people's intentions from their facial expressions and tone of voice and body language. And he says to you, hey, I'd be happy to rescue you and drive you back to town, on the condition that you can promise that you'll give me $1,000 as compensation once we get to town. because you don't have your wallet now, so you can't pay him now. Now for you, this is a great deal. You get to live in exchange for $1,000, and you would very much like to take this deal. The problem is that you know now that once you get to town, you will have no reason to give him the $1,000. This is assuming, by the way, that you and the driver are both selfish agents. So you only care about maximizing your own payoff. And so knowing that you won't have reason to give him the $1,000 when you get to town, there's no way for you to truly believe now that you will give him the $1,000. And he, being an expert face and body language reader, can tell that you know you won't have reason to give him the $1,000 once you get to town, and so he's not willing to rescue you, and you end up much worse off than you would have. The parallels here to Newcombs Problem are, the rational character is that which will always give the $1,000 because having that character leads to you getting rescued. But once you're in town, the rational act is to not give the $1,000. Again, assuming you're a selfish agent. And this might just be one more case of what Kenny calls the deep tragedy of rationality, in which rational character and rational acts diverge. I encourage you to check out the podcast for more discussion of Newcomb-like problems and also other decision theories that have tried to go beyond causal and evidential decision theory in an attempt to resolve paradoxes like that of Newcomb's problem or Parfit's hitchhiker.
All right, so got this thing here. What I want to do then is figure out if I draw this as a DAG. I want to draw this out and figure out what it looks like before I start diving into the. So evidently, causal decision theory is supposed to make this easy. I keep trying to bring up a little display that I can use to show my writing notes. But anyway, the idea is this, that we have this idea, we have a paradox, and hopefully that if we can parse the idea using a little bit of causal inference, our lives become easier. But I'm not going to get any luck with sharing screen today, so that's going to be out of the question. So I don't know, let's just draw a picture somewhere. 1 second. Pick up a keynote or something like that. So let's just do this. So let's see here. We come in. Let's just put out the order of events, right? So so what causes what? So you got a box choice. And that's going to lead to some utility. Right, and let's just draw that as a DAG. And so what from there, We also have the oracle's prediction. It's called as my box choice. And my box choice affects the oracle's prediction. And so I think what is happening, looks like somebody's pinging me. So I think what's happening is that what works is that we're the kind of traditional evidential decision theory is optimizing this as finding argmax of E of U given oracles. No, not given. We have to integrate over. Right, so we're doing. One second, getting a bit of a work emergency, so. And what causal decision theory would say that we should actually maximize this? Which is the same as what an well, these So my box choice affects the oracle's prediction, which affects my utility. So unless the model is I'm actually not sure how the intervention semantics helps here. So I change my choice. Because if we assume that, so I don't know what the oracle's prediction is for one. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out like how to use causal semantics to make this result different, and I'm not seeing it. Right? I choose this box that affect my choice. Maybe if I expand the model a bit, let's try that. My intended choice and so and then my actual choice, but I don't see how this helps, because unless unless the oracle's prediction affected my intended choice, but I don't see how I could do it. I can't even affect the actual choice. There's no new information. Okay, so I'm back to the drawing board here. I'm not really figuring out. So I must have drawn the model wrong, but I don't really see. How these two cases differ. Because if I do the intervention, this node here is exogenous, so it doesn't actually change anything. Something needs to affect my choice. What affects my choice? So let's see what the causality in 3 will. Causality issues arise when the predictor is posited as infallible and capable of error. If the predictor predicts that the player will choose randomly, then box B will choose nothing. This assumes a player that inherently random or predictable. This assumes that inherently random or unpredictable events would not come into play anyway during the process of making a choice. Quantum mind? What on earth? However, these issues can still be explored if the case of an infallible predictor. Under this condition, it seems that only B's. I'm not sure what are y'all going on about quantum mind stuff. So, okay, we got a lot to work with here. These issues can only be can still be explored in the case of an infallible predictor. Under this condition, it seems that taking only B is the correct options. This analysis argues that we can ignore the possibilities that return 0. Alright, so this guy suggests that in a world with perfect predictors, And I wonder if maybe there's a counterfactual argument to be made here. Maybe if I say, I pick the argument that optimizes U, but then counterfactually reason that had I picked so it feels like yeah, I'm not really seeing if I could kind of reason what I would get and then predict what I would get and then predict what I would have gotten conditional on that. But that also seems not like a normal kind of algorithm. It's like I know what I'll get. Conditional on what I know I'll get. So it's more like me being live stumped. I don't know how to represent this with my DAG here. So this is just going over a bunch of kind of like I want to see a model. I don't want to see all these ideas. Let me see. So Stanford Encyclopedia. Of philosophy, I think. Yeah, let's do Newcombs Problem. Current issues. I think there was an issue, there was a bit in here from Pearl. So what I'm trying to do here is understand this idea of Newcombs problem and how you model it using a causal model. So Newcombs problem is the idea that we got two boxes and one always contains $1,000. One contains maybe $1 million. You have the option of taking one box or both, but the trick is that there's this algorithm that can predict you perfectly, and if it predicts that you're going to take it predicts that you're going to take the box and the box that maybe has $1 million, it'll put $1 million into it. If it predicts that you're going to take a box, if you're going to take both boxes, it won't put $1 million into it. And so the question is, what should you pick? And from one standpoint, you could say pick the box where the machine is going to put in $1 million, because you always get $1 million. But the other standpoint is to say, like, well, if you already knew that if you already decided to pick that box, and then so you know there's $1 million in it, then you then know that if you took both boxes, you get $1 million, 1,000. And so like the question is, how do you solve it? And then there's the causal decision theoretic idea is to say to choose both boxes, and try to understand why. I understand it in terms of like the decision theory principle, but I want to understand it in terms of a causal model. So here we got a little bit about DAGs from Spirites, Clymore, and Chinese and Pearl. Causal model meets the causal Markov condition if and only if. Okay, we're just talking about. So how do we get to the actual? Directed acyclic asks present causal structure clearly and so clarify its decision theory points that depend on causal structure. For example, Eels observes that choice is not genuine unless a decision screens off. Joyce uses a causal graph to depict how this dilemma may happen in Newcombs problem that arises with psychological twin. What? He shows that Newcombs problem is a genuine choice despite correlation of acts and states because a decision screens off that correlation. Maybe that's it then. Maybe that's the Wolfram Spahn constructs Newcombs problem, a causal model that distinguishes a decision and its execution, and argues that given the model, causal decision theory recommends one boxing. Okay. So yeah, the YouTube video says the causal decision theory says two boxing. Here we're hearing one boxing. So all right, so maybe so we need to look at this. So Joyce 2007 and Spahn 2012. Show me a picture. Show me a picture. What is that? Okay. That looks a bit dense. Not going to be able to do that in a stream session. Well, let's look at this. There is a rich literature here. So we got this James Joyce guy. Oh, who was the other one? Spahn or something? Spahn. Great. All right, so this is my homework then. Let's just see quickly if they actually have any nice pictures. Okay. So we got a lot to work with here. So this looks like the good reading. All right, so maybe I'll stick this one in reading group. All right, I'm gonna call it there for today. Hopefully I can get a good write-up of some of these ideas and then write them out. Huh. See you on Friday.